Something you may not know about me are my professional credentials. I spent the last 2 years we're approaching 17,000 books into little free libraries. And I get a variety of reactions to this behavior, as you can probably imagine. It started when we took on a publisher who had 6,000 overstock books who didn't want to recycle them or be charged for them. And so I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I can work this out. I'm a problem solving type, and so I did it. And then I was amazed at like how fast they went.
There's a certain type of person that mistakes a little library for like the garbage can, and I guess it like kills them to throw out books. So you get like America's Best Colleges 1997 and people are super into like their kids, and so if their kids liked a book, no matter how crappy that book was, they don't want to throw the book out, so they'll just stick it in a little library, even if the little library has a nameplate on it that says "We are dedicated to punk rock and crime."
I felt like it was a really fascinating social experiment in the sense of you're giving and receiving a lot of unsolicited advice all the time, whether you mean to or not.
I've sort of mellowed in my view of this over the last several years. I used to get really irritated and just take stuff out and throw it away, but I think now I would be more forgiving. In fact, I am more forgiving. I still have the library up in its new location. I put books in a couple times a year, but most of the time I kind of let it be. And somebody is rotating out books pretty frequently. I mean, they're not necessarily books that I'm all that interested in or that have anything to do with punk rock and crime by and large. But somebody cares enough to go and rotate the stock and make sure that it's not like jammed to the gills and also not empty. So I'm like, you know what? Let them do their thing.
I love this. I feel like you and Joe might be like in another world nemesis or perhaps friendly opponents.
Hi, I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 28 years.
I'm Elly Blue, the vice president of Microcosm. We started this podcast to share what we've learned with newer publishers, so you can learn from our mistakes. Or maybe you just want to learn about the publishing industry.
This week, we welcome first-time guest, repeat-time author, Jay.
And long-time listener.
I'm sorry, longtime fan. I guess that's the important thing for all of you to know. J. Hunter Bennett, author of the brand new More Punk Than the Public Library and author of the less than brand new Prodigal Rogerson and that Fugazi basketball hoop photo.
Zine.
Upside Down Punks.
Yes, right, it does have a title.
Amazing true story of that Fugazi basketball hoop show.
And, this is why we have professionals on this program, because we normally can't always keep up. But Hunter comes to us today to help with an age-old problem, which we hear this from, I guess, the deep anxieties of every author. And that is the exact same thing that Faith Harper has always brought up to me when I'm like, how come you needed to write books? And her answer was, well, nobody was writing the books that I wanted to be published, the books that I wanted to read. So Hunter, why do you, or maybe I should say, how do you come to this approach?
How do you write the books that you want to read?
Well, that's the easy part.
I came to this approach inadvertently. I was obsessed from the time I was 13 years old with 12 actually, with Roger Rogerson, the first Circle Jerks bass player. And, he just disappeared, which to my mind would be kind of like if like Paul McCartney disappeared from the Beatles and nobody ever said where he was. So nobody ever said who he was, where he was to my satisfaction. And, you would think when the internet came along and literally like you can find anybody and find out what happened, that remained not true of Roger. So one day I was like, you know what? I'm going to write a 5-page article about where Roger Rogerson went. And the first person I talked to was Lucky Lair from the Circle Jerks, and he had no idea where Roger had been for like 12 years from the time he quit the band to the time that he came back. Actually, I guess it was 13 years. So I was like, I am going to write this story because nobody else has written it. And if I'm interested in it, then there's at least one other person out in the world that's going to be interested in this story.
Our industry is run by billionaires and conglomerates.
At Microcosm, we wanted the freedom to independently sell our books, easily pay royalties, manage our inventory, and understand our business all in one place.
That's why we've been using our own software since 2001.
Now, we want to share it with you.
Working Lit is the only business success software that is created and owned 100% by publishers for publishers.
Join Working Lit and get the agency you need to help your business grow.
Visit workinglit.com to try it for free.
So all that's a long way of saying I wrote a book that I wish somebody else had already written.
And so then how does that translate to your new book, More Punk Than the Public Library?
That is more like I created the zine that I wish that somebody else had created. I was sitting around during the pandemic. I was bored. I was starved for human contact. And so I started a little library that gave away books about punk rock and crime. And because I'm kind of extra, as my daughter would say, I created I was like, there needs to be something that accompanies this library that explains it to people. So I started, issue 1 was a FAQ, or frequently asked questions, explaining to people how to use a little library, which is probably overkill. Like, I think most people get it. But then like issue 2, because it was still the pandemic and I was still bored and lonely, I was like, you know what, we should have real content here. So I recruited my sister to write a essay about a book that she loved. And I was like, you know, this is a punk rock town, and even more specifically, Chevy Chase, DC, where I live, is a punk rock neighborhood. So I should interview DC punk rockers. So I called my favorite DC punk guitarist, or I emailed him actually, Michael Hampton, who was in Embrace, The Faith, SOA, and one of my faves, The Snakes, actually maybe my all-time favorite DC punk band. You know, you can read any number of interviews with punk bands where they ask them like, what's your next record? Or like, what's this song about? I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to ask people what books they liked and what music they listened to. And I wanted to get a sense of what people's life was like. So that's sort of how I went about this. And then I would just keep asking more people that I knew or was related to write essays, and I would ask more musicians that I knew to answer questions, and then people would start sending in strange articles that didn't quite fit into what we had done, and I was like, this is great, let's put that in there. So that was, you know, that was the kind of zine that I was interested in, and that was the one that I ended up putting together.
And I mean, we have a little free library too, and like we also curate it. But we don't leave like passive aggressive notes, I guess, about what people leave in it.
We just kind of rotate it out if it's like a waterlogged college textbook, you know?
Yeah, that can go. Or if somebody wants to put in a bunch of true crime novels, we would bring them over to your little free library if it were nearby.
Yeah.
But we just bring it to a neighbor's.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Because we have like 600 in the city, so it's easy to just, you know, rebalance.
I don't know if bookstores still do it, but it used to be you went to like Barnes and Noble, and before you even got in, like in the vestibule on the way into the store, there would be just books that clearly they didn't care whether anyone stole or not. But I thought about having sort of the equivalent of that at my library, where there's just a cardboard box that I stuck crummy books in.
I mean, I feel like this is like ties into the theme of this episode, like creating the book that you want to read. It's like creating the library, creating the selection. You're like a curator, both as an author and a zine editor and a little free librarian or bookstore proprietor, as you call yourself in the book.
We built this software from scratch to solve our own problems starting in 2001.
It's not only the reason for our survival, but the reason we've been a Publishers Weekly fastest growing publisher 3 years in a row.
Now we want to share it with you.
Join Working Lit and get back the agency to understand your publishing business, market and sell your books, and painlessly pay royalties.
Working Lit, doing the math for publishers.
Visit workinglit.com to give it a try for free. Do you feel like you are a curator in many parts of your life? Does this come naturally to you, or is this more like part of this creative impulse around books?
I've mellowed a lot in my old age. I used to have very definite opinions about music and what was good and what wasn't, and books, what was good and what wasn't, television, what was good and what wasn't. I think by virtue of getting married and having children and having people not have living with people that don't have the exact same taste I have, and also who've told me over the years that like having someone tell you that what you like is wrong or bad is not something that anybody wants to hear. I think I've taken on a much more live and let live attitude.
That is literally how I describe my own attitude all the time anymore. And, it's rare. There was a strange moment a few weeks ago where our sales team was like, we'd really like you to have a stronger stance on AI. And I'm like, no one has ever asked me to have a stronger stance on anything in my entire life. They actually usually say the opposite, especially Elly. But
well, speaking of short treatises that investigate very specific questions or incidences, do you have any other projects that you're working on now?
I've got a couple of irons in the fire. There was I don't want to give anything away because I worry that somebody's well, I think it's unlikely somebody would steal my idea, but I like to come out with something and be like, oh, that's weird. Like, because I feel like that's my whole shtick, is I just find like good stories that deserve to be out in the world and then just sort of unleash them.
Awesome.
This one is much more obscure than the Fugazi basketball hoop show, though it also involves a very popular band. And it's a great story, and I'm hoping that I can convince the people whose story it is to let me write it up.
Readers, you're going to have to go to microcosm.pub and go to Hunter Bennett's author page and then hit subscribe, and then you'll get notified as soon as we have a new product up from Hunter.
And then you'll see all the draft covers too. That's the most fun part.
Yes. Or
you really
soon.
What you're paying for with your time is like the ability to get new information faster than we would actually want you to have it. Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub.
On Twitter at Microcosm.
On Facebook at Microcosm Publishing.
On Instagram at Microcosm_pub.
And here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.